If you're new to the channel, please subscribe.
Here's an image I've done quite a bit of editing to, and it's obvious that the tree is the focal point of the image. But I want to draw even more attention to the tree, and I can do this by applying a post-crop vignette, and I can also add some grain, and this all takes place in the effects panel. Now I've got three different options. I've got highlight priority, which is going to be the most pronounced, color priority, which is more subtle, and paint overlay. Now I almost always stick with highlight priority and color priority. Let me show you how the vignette works. If you drag the amount slider to the left, you'll start applying a vignette. You'll apply a dark vignette around the image. Now there are times when you might want to have a bright vignette around the image, and you do that by dragging the slider to the right. In the case of this image, I think the darker vignette is going to be more appropriate, and I'm going to drag the slider actually too far so I can show you how the controls work. I've got a nice dark vignette. I drag the midpoint slider, I change the midpoint of the vignette, and that also affects the size of the vignette, as you can see. I'm going to leave it at its default. Now I've got roundness. I can either make a rectangular vignette by dragging to the left, or a very round vignette by dragging to the right. In fact, if I change my midpoint, I can have an actual circle. In this case, I'm going to stick with the default. Feather. That determines how sharp the edge of the vignette is. I can drag it to the left to get a very hard vignette, or the right to get a very soft vignette. And the highlight slider changes the way the outside of the vignette looks. So I drag the highlight slider more to the right. Notice I've got a lighter vignette, and to its default on the left, I've got a darker vignette. Okay, so let me just go ahead, and for this image, I'm going to set the feather back to the default. I'm going to set the roundness a little bit more towards rectangular, so I've just got a real subtle vignette around the edges, and turn the amount down, so all I've got is a slight vignette, but your viewer's eye goes from shadow to light, so when they see the dark edges, their eye is going to be drawn to the center of the image. Now let's take a look at grain, and to do that I'm going to zoom in 1:1, and this is a plain area of the image. And now if I open the grain slider and increase the amount, you can see the grain start to appear in the image. And this is a realistic looking grain. Notice it's not all uniform. It's an effect very much like the old film days. And I can increase the size of the grain to suit the image, and also the roughness, make it a softer grain or a harder grain. And use this with however many grains of salt you wish, but I would suggest, if you're trying to emulate a film, especially a film that's a finer grain film, a lower ISO film, I suggest you just apply a very little bit of grain. And there's the image, and you can see the grain in the image, and I can toggle the effects panel on and off to show the effect it has on the overall image. That's just a nice subtle effect that draws you into the image. Now, you're the photographer, you're the artist, so if you want to apply vignettes and add grain, have at it. If you prefer just a straight image, that's acceptable as well. I want to show you one more thing on the post-crop vignetting. I've got the roundness set where I want, and I'm going to change the midpoint a bit. So it's more inside the image, and I'm going to change the feather down so it's a hard edge. Just drag it a little bit more the midpoint so it just touches the edge of the image. And now take this the other way, and I've sort of got an Instagram effect. So there's a number of things you can do with it. It's just a matter of experimenting with the controls until what you see is what you like.